Welcome and thank you for joining us today. We'll get started in a minute, but first we want to make sure that you understand how to use your toolbar. If you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to enter them in the Q&A tab on the right side of your screen. If you're having logistical issues, you can also let us know through that window and we'll do our best to help you resolve the issue. We encourage you to enter your questions during the course of the presentation. If time permits, we'll try to answer questions that are relevant to today's topic and for the entire audience. If we do not respond to your question during the presentation, we'll follow up with you individually. I'd like to introduce the presenters for today's webinar, Nick Hurst with EPA's Indoor Environments Division and CR Hero from Meritage Homes. CR is the Vice President for Environmental Affairs at Meritage Homes, a large national builder and an Indoor airPlus partner. CR speaks regularly at corporate sales trainings around the country and will be sharing some of his experience on today's webinar. With that, I'll turn it over to Nick.
Excellent. Thank you, Kat, for the introduction. We'll run into the agenda right away and talk about what we're going to be discussing today, which is primarily the Indoor airPlus Sales Training Kit. And this is a great tool for builders. If you have a sales team, you can use this with your sales team to help them communicate the value of Indoor airPlus to prospective buyers. So we'll talk about what the kit is, how to use the trainer's guide, the participant guide, how to access it within your My Energy Star account, and then some new Indoor airPlus resources and tools as well. Again, we're really privileged to have CR Hero with us today, and thank you again, CR, for joining us. CR, do you want to just tell us a little bit about your experience with what typical customers come to you for and why they come to Meritage to look for a home?
Absolutely. We've had the pleasure of partnering with Indoor airPlus and participating in the sales training kit over the last several years, why it's been developed and refined. And it was really based on a clear understanding as we've developed a program to nationally build homes beyond the requirements, to build to a better standard. We had to be very clear on why we were doing what we were doing. As we'll go through, a program like Indoor airPlus, there's really good prescriptive requirements on how to build, what materials to use, how to work with your trade partners to execute against the requirements of the program. But to extract the value, you really have to be aware of what you're doing it for and who your customers are. So Nick, if you can hit the next slide. From a builder's perspective, the focus has largely been for decades now on meeting the needs of the consumer. Finding great land opportunities, building compelling floor plans, and competing in a marketplace with a lot of choices over the price of the home. And the truth is those are the things that you do in order to be viable. Those are the things you need to do so that your customers could choose you, but within that process, there's really nothing that demonstrates to the buyer among the choices that didn't screw up location, floor plan, and price, that this is the home that's the best home among their choices. And as we go through today, the reason I really wanted to participate is we really struggled with how we can talk to the consumers and inspire them to choose better. And what we've discovered through this process is there's two big components, is that people choose among the homes that meet their needs the best home for them. And sometimes that means we have to inspire them that the homes they've lived in have not been built as well as they could be with today's technology, and also that by partnering with builders and trusted experts that you truly can improve the quality of your life in these homes and improve the day-to-day lives your family lives while living in these homes. And that's really the point of today, is how do we not execute against Indoor airPlus, but how do we drive value for the builder, and most importantly, how do we create the awareness that there's true substantive value to the buyers of these homes.
That's great. Thanks, CR. We know that there's a lot of competing priorities for home buyers when they're making that challenging and sometimes emotional decision. On the end of the product, we've heard from really pleased Indoor airPlus homeowners as well. Here's an example from one who had a quote that we moved into our new home, which is Indoor airPlus. Health issues cleared up immediately for all of us. Health is obviously a very important aspect of the Indoor airPlus program, and of course Just because you buy an indoor airPlus home doesn't mean that all of your afflictions are going to be immediately healed and taken care of, but it is one of the really important values that the program is here to promote, is healthier indoor air and what that means in the long run for homeowners. So when you do get these types of quotes, we certainly encourage you to save them, promote them with your future clients as well. So we're going to talk about the Indoor airPlus Sales Training Kit. Again, this is a way for you to educate your sales team on how to sell more indoor airPlus homes, increase their ability to effectively communicate the value of indoor air quality, gain a little bit of knowledge and some talking points about the features and benefits, and we'll look at those here shortly. What we're going to have is a trainer's guide and the participant guide that you see there. There's some interactive activities, and then there's even a scoring matrix that they can utilize. And this is very compatible with the Energy Star Sales Training Kit. If you haven't accessed that tool yet, that's been out for a couple of years, I highly encourage you to go to your My Energy Star account or Mesa and access that one as well. You can use that in conjunction with this kit, or you can use this just as a standalone training if you really want to beef up on the Indoor airPlus component. So it covers a variety of different client profiles, and again, really helps you improve your messaging around Indoor airPlus. So here's what the guide looks like. When you download it, you have these two tools, the participant guide, the trainer's guide. The trainer's guide is exactly the same. It just has some additional notes in there for whoever is doing the training and doing the sales, is the sales lead in your company. And then there's some additional handouts as well that go along with the course. This is also a slide deck that's customizable to your needs. So this is the opening slide of it. We're not going to go through the entire deck. We've picked a few of the kind of important pieces of it to show you. But this is something that you can customize to your own needs. It's set up in two different modules. So the learning objectives here for each module are, first off, in the beginning, to differentiate between what is an average new home, what's an Energy Star certified home, and what's an Indoor airPlus home, and to describe some of those features and benefits that the program brings. And then identify an ideal Indoor airPlus client through a number of different client segments. In the second module, and you could do these back to back, or you could do one week, do one the next. The second module allows you to create some value propositions and then apply those value propositions in a practical way. So, when your sales team meets a client for the first time, when they walk in the door, how do you know if they're an ideal Indoor airPlus client? What do they look like? What do they say? What types of questions do you ask to really know where their pain points are and what things are going to make them interested in an Energy Star in an Indoor airPlus home? So that's what we'll learn a little bit about today. TR, there's a number of key factors that motivate buyers. As you mentioned, energy efficiency is one of them, but tell us more about some of those.
Yeah, I think that most of the people that would think about certifying their home to Indoor Plus are already considering differentiating themselves based on value proposition. And so most builders aren't necessarily their buyers. We try to talk about our buyers about being this 36-year-old mother of three, and how do they see the world, how do they make decisions, what's important to them, and what sort of language do you want to use when you're talking to that buyer. And what's important is how important it is to the people choosing among the viable 30 or 4 homes that meet their needs, what differentiates at a substantive way and what credibly means to them, this home is better for my family. This is a better builder, this is a better choice, and this creates a better value to me. And obviously, kind of built on the foundation of energy efficiency that we've been hearing through the media and that has been being more and more adopted by the average builder, is most people indicate that they would choose energy efficient as a differentiator and a better choice among other homes. But what's really important when you think about indoor air quality is that bridge. And the next statistic is that energy efficiency, Nick, if you can click it, energy efficiency to most people becomes synonymous, and most people don't understand that bridge, but becomes synonymous with healthier homes. And it's true. If you're using better insulating techniques, if you're doing better sealing to create an efficient home, you're also blocking sources of pollen and dust and bugs. And so there is a tremendous amount of overlap in the techniques used to execute against indoor air quality, but also be in mind that there's a tremendous amount of overlap from the average buyer when you talk about energy efficiency and how important it is, that they also have an expectation that that also implies you're building them a healthier home.
Great. Why does indoor air quality matter? Here's a few key statistics. CR, have you used any of these in discussions with your sales team or with your home buyers?
Yeah, it's fun. Right before I got on this conference call to talk to all of you, I had a call from a sales agent in Texas saying, hey, it's dogwood season now, and my potential customers are going house shopping, and they're coming in, and they're coming in with kids with watery eyes and runny noses, and what can we do, because we build to Indoor Plus, what can we do to tell them? And the first thing I said is we need to make sure that we can make statements that are backed and valid and vetted by experts. So go to the Indoor Air Plus program, look at these affirmative statements from the United States Environmental Protection Agency about indoor air, about when you apply these best practices, what you can do to create healthier environments and opportunities to reduce eye irritation, headaches, allergies. And so it gives builders who aren't experts at the biomedical science of PM10 really good, tangible things to inspire consumers and to help leverage these sorts of statements about why it's important for buyers to include the thought of choosing a healthier home in their buying process.
Great. Thanks. Well, we want to talk about what is an average new home when we talk with our sales team, because we're certainly, stacking up an average new home against, a better home. And when we build an average new home, we're building a home that just meets code requirements. And, these are the minimum requirements to meet the practical and that are adequate for protecting life, safety, and welfare of the public. If you're in a jurisdiction that actually enforces the code, that's creating a decent home. And unfortunately, a lot of places don't even meet or enforce those codes sometimes. But what we're really trying to sell to the consumer is something much better than that. And we'll talk about what that looks like. For those of you who have been doing Energy Star for a while, this should be very common sense to you. Better is better is one of the key Energy Star taglines. And with Energy Star, it's a tried and true building system and methodology. It comes these kind of 4 key pillars of marketing that you can market to your homeowner. You have peace of mind. You have enduring quality because of such a great thermal enclosure system and a high efficiency HVAC system, and then efficient lighting and appliances, etc. What that brings you in terms of value is wall-to-wall comfort. And that comfort factor is something that really drives people toward the brand. And then proven value. So we're going to have an Energy Star home that delivers, up to 30% savings compared to typical new homes. And of course, one of the key elements for those of you in the rating industry is this third-party verification. That comes with every Energy Star and Indoor Air Plus home. As a rater, if you're just doing Indoor Air Plus for the first time, it's not changing your scope substantially. You're looking for 2 inspections for the home at minimum, pre-drywall and post-drywall, and post-drywall for the closeout. And you're going to be really providing that builder with that additional quality assurance that all of those specifications for Energy Star and Indoor Air Plus were met. That's something that needs to be communicated to the home buyer as well. The home buyer doesn't necessarily have to understand the ins and outs of all of the Energy Star checklists. Those of us who are in the industry understand that they are thorough and very well detailed and very well thought out, many footnotes. What you're adding with Indoor Air Plus is one additional checklist to pass along to the home buyer. Again, they don't need to know the ins and outs of it, but they do need to understand that there is a very thorough inspection process that goes into it, and this is the basics of what it looks like. So let's talk a little bit about some of those features and benefits that go into the home. Again, homeowners might not understand combustion venting, but they should understand that carbon monoxide is something that's not helpful and can be disastrous. It can be fatal. So we're going to put carbon monoxide alarms in every sleeping zone in your home. With Indoor Air Plus, we're also going to have more of a focus on filtration. So they might not understand the minimum efficiency reporting value, but if you say the MERV rating, the higher the better, And with your Energy Star home, you're going to get MERV 6. With your Indoor airPlus home, you're going to get a MERV 8 or better. That hopefully is easy to quantify for the home buyer. Here's another look at what MERV ratings look like on a broad scale. With an average new home, you may not even have a filter that's MERV rated. So it's important to pass that along to your homeowner. We're at least getting you, way up the scale. And if you do use MERV 11 or MERV 13 or something better in your home, by all means, be sure that the sales team understands that and knows how to communicate that to the home buyer.
And one of the important things of those prior graphs that I really want to underscore is, a lot of people, whether they're building or rating homes, self-select and are technically proficient in understanding MERV and SEER and ACH 50s, but these charts are really, driven to focus on how do you convert a lot of arcane knowledge that we all hold in being in this industry and being building scientists to our average buyer. How do we demonstrate to them what are the opportunities and how can we empower you to make a good choice? So much of our sales technique has evolved from explaining features to creating opportunities for people to make better choices, and that's really benefit-based. It's really emotional. It's really about how to inspire people to take care of their family better, and here's how to help in some tools to ask questions of your choices of these different builders, of these different potentials. Hey, what are these symbols of better building and better trust?
Excellent. We all know that in an Energy Star home, we're going to have ductwork that's sealed very thoroughly and accurately. It's hard to communicate to a home buyer sometimes what the benefits of that are unless you start talking about, well, where is your ductwork? Is it in a crawl space or is it in an attic? It's really important to have that ductwork sealed tightly for efficiency reasons, but also for health reasons and long-term durability reasons. Crawl spacing is another. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, Nick. The don't underestimate the value of the picture Nick is showing you. The crawl space to the left and the crawl space to the right. One looks clean in a place that you'd be okay if your baby crawled through. One looks like there's a rat around the corner, and those differences have great emotional impact and validation to help buyers reset what their expectations are and how their homes are built. They grew up in the home on the left picture and didn't know it was bad until you show them the picture on the right and say, this is what you could have. And it resets their expectations to anything less than the picture on the right is less than I deserve for my family.
Great points. One other feature that is important to note for Indoor airPlus is safer building materials. And this certainly is beyond the scope of energy efficiency and that overlap in the HVAC world between energy efficiency and health. This is really about building a healthier home with the product that we put in it. And these products are not just low VOC or low formaldehyde, but they're actually certified by a third-party program or standard. That eludes people sometimes, and when you're first reviewing the Indoor airPlus specifications, it's certainly important to review exactly what those details are in Section 6 for low-emission materials. There's a great guide to help you with that as well on the Indoor airPlus website. But very simply, what we want to communicate to the home buyer is the products that we're putting in here have been tested and for safety and for volatile organic compounds. Now, volatile organic compounds, VOCs, those are terms that may be challenging for some homeowners to understand. Formaldehyde seems to be one that's in the news quite a bit more recently. The Shelton Group has done a lot of research on energy efficiency and home buyer preferences in this market for over the last decade, and they've been tracking some of these questions about home buyer preferences. We saw, this is an example from their 2013 report, that there's becoming an increase in the interest in buying furniture, carpets, mattresses that that emit chemicals as a major concern. So they may not be, again, the same types of concerns as school district or lot size or number of bedrooms and countertops, but they're growing as an area of interest. Another key feature is moisture management. Energy Star has done a great job of when increasing the specifications for energy efficiency, also kind of addressing the moisture and durability features that are so critical to creating a long-term durable structure that's healthy as well. Indoor airPlus has some additional measures built in, but really what we're trying to communicate to the consumer very plainly and simply is, look, we have taken attention to detail inside your home, in the building envelope itself, in the grading, and we are not going to let bulk water get into your home and affect the long-term durability of the home. We're going to fully flash the windows and doors. Maybe you don't typically do this type of valley lining in your climate zone, but if you do, certainly it's important to point that out. And this is a good opportunity for you to take some pictures with your field staff, insert them into your sales trainings, so that your sales team kind of knows a little bit what's behind the walls, a little bit what happens in terms of some of those moisture management details, so that they can communicate those to especially the engineering types of folks who walk in the door and are looking for a home. And then at the end of the day, we always find that it's really helpful to kind of, again, go back to an average new home, stack up what this looks like in terms of those kind of key pillars and key messages, the key components that are going into the home. You have the peace of mind, enduring quality, wall-to-wall comfort, and proven value of an Energy Star home, but what you're adding is those bottom two items as well: a healthier home, a safer home, lower pollutants, and better allergen protection, radon control, carbon monoxide detectors, etc. Here's another way to look at it. Again, these slides are really helpful. I've heard of builders printing some of these out and posting them in the home, just so that if there's no one there to engage the home buyer when they walk through the door, they at least have a pretty quick snapshot of what those homes are about that they're about to walk through. So with the first activity in the Indoor Plus Sales Training Kit, you'll walk through a features and benefits video. And so what we'll do, the participant guide and the training manuals will walk you through this, but you'll actually watch the Improving New Homes with Indoor Air Plus video. There's also a couple other videos on the Indoor Air Plus website that you can choose, but this one in particular is embedded into the slideshow that you'll get. And then you'll just have the participants list at least 2 benefits and 2 features of an Indoor Air Plus home, and they'll list that in their guide. At the end, we'll get together and we'll say, well, what benefits and what features did you hear? And we'll discuss that. So pretty straightforward. You'll do something similar with activity 2. These activities usually only take 5 to 15 minutes, depending on how big your group is and how much time you want to spend. But activity 2, you'll do something similar with the brochure that we showed earlier. So you'll have them look at the brochures, describe at least 1 benefit and 1 feature of the home from the handouts, and then you can separate the class into small groups potentially. Have one of them look at half the items and have one of them look at the other half, and then again come back as a group and discuss what are the features, how does that translate to benefits. So part of this is a little bit of reiteration, trying to look at these features and benefits in different ways, hear about them in different ways, and discuss them in different ways to really ingrain them. So after we've kind of looked at some of those features and benefits, then we get into the client profiles, and this is the fun part where we have to kind of assess who it is that's coming in the door, what are their kind of key pain points, and how do we discuss with them what the benefits of Indoor Air Plus are. So there's going to be folks with different ages, different income, different levels of education. All of those will contribute to different types of attitudes and potential buying behaviors. So the Shelton Group contributed substantially to what goes behind this customer segmentation. Again, they've been kind of tracking the preferences of home buyers, especially surrounding energy efficiency and conservation for quite a long time. And Advanced Energy also contributed substantially to the formation and the development of this curriculum. So kind of discussing how we discuss these priorities with home buyers. So you have the largest group here, the concerned parents, 34%. You have working class realists, you have cautious conservatives, and you have true believers. Each of these make up a slightly different segment that kind of changes a little bit over time. It's important to note, I think, that when you see a home buyer walking through the door, they're probably not going to fall dead center into any one of these specific categories, because everybody has tendencies and preferences that kind of are very gray and cross a lot of different lines. But as best you can, within the first 30 seconds, understand kind of what their core preferences and tendencies are, that helps you communicate better with them. So when we look at true believers, for example, Shelton Group has noted that these are often white-collar and professionals, usually very well educated, sometimes have a higher income, sometimes identify themselves as environmentalists. And what they've tracked over time is the number of conservation activities that they report being involved. So this is what makes this sector a true believer. They have a high number of conservation activities that they undertake. So what does this mean? It means that you probably want to emphasize the environmental initiative, the importance of saving our natural resources as a part of your home building process. And so Energy Star certainly is a part of that. They value energy efficiency, maybe even over comfort and beauty. And so they've made the decision probably to go to Energy Star for the reasons of saving the environment, but stepping into Indoor AirPlus also is a very natural step for them, especially if they have the ability and the funds to pay for that type of home. So concerned parents is another kind of key target for Indoor AirPlus home buyers. These might be younger and middle-aged individuals, typically average income, some moderately educated. These are somewhat less likely to be homeowners originally. They may be a first-time home buyer, and maybe they're not quite as focused on those conservation activities and environmentalism as those true believers that we just discussed. But they also have some very key reasons that they are going to be interested in an Indoor AirPlus home, and the health and safety are those two reasons, those two kind of additional key pillars. So there's, when you're assessing, do I have kind of a young parent who might have kids, moving to the health and safety conversation very quickly in your discussion and your pitch to them is important. Then you deal with cautious conservatives, possibly, who are predominantly Caucasian, according to Shelton Group, a little bit better, well-educated, oftentimes professionals, maybe retirees. These folks are oftentimes driven by return on investment. They may not be quite as focused on environmentalism. So you may not discuss climate change. You might be more focused on energy independence when it comes to discussing what Energy Star means. But again, what is this investment going to give you in terms of payback and reduced utility costs? Those are very important pieces. But they also might be interested in peace of mind. They also might be interested in a healthier home that they can retire in for the long run and feel good about their quality of life toward the end of life. So these are all key aspects and different components of how that lead into different questioning in that engagement we have with them in those first few minutes they're there. There's all kinds of customer segments. CR, how do you sum this up in a nutshell?
Yeah, I wanted to take a couple beats because I really respect the analysis of Shelton Groups, and we use their statistics and their buyer preferences a lot in engaging consumers in the right messaging. But I just wanted to make sure that that we underscore the importance of segmenting on why, and that is our sales professionals often still have assumptions built into the way they engage their consumer that are based on the way they work. And as we introduce new benefits and new features to the way we build, there's not as much refinement in the sales process from the history of the way we've been selling houses. We've been selling houses for walk-in closets and kitchens and granite countertops for an awful long time, but when we ask them to do something new, it's often that the sales professional will default to, how would I want to hear about this thing? And so they use their language and their perspective. And this part of the training is really important just to shake up the perspective that the buyer segments are about understanding that the exact same benefit has very different messages. So this is an example from a slide that I talk to my salespeople about, and we talk about cautious conservatives as Cuba Gooding, and he's all about the money and how people that have lived in homes for a long time, really want some validation about their experience. And indoor air quality, people have experienced, dusty homes. They've experienced homes where they have allergies and asthma and issues with their homes, and so you can relate to those people based on their experience. Where Kermits are obviously true believers, and these millennials, they come in with different expectations of the partnerships that builders and providers provide to them that are in line with their own ethical statement, and being able to demonstrate in the way you talk that it's about them and their priorities, not about you foisting your priorities upon them. And silly things like leprechauns. When you sell a home, so much is focused around shiny things, the granite and the stainless steel and the flooring and the metal spindles in the stairway. How do you convert those sorts of aesthetic, I like to entertain, I want to raise my families, into really important parts about, well, you want to raise your family in a healthy environment. You want to bring, friends and family to dinners in a place that's, better suited and healthier for them to be brought into. And then the last is the recognition with all buyer segments that there's a lot of skepticism. And so Debbie Downer kind of represents how important it is to engage other stakeholders that your buyers will look into for validation. So these are the key influencers to your buyers, whether they're realtors, whether they're appraisers, whether they're whether it's how you go to market in your collateral and on your web page. The important part is buyer segmentation is enabling salespeople to see buyers as independent people with different needs from their own, and to talk to them in a way that's compelling to them, not necessarily tailored to the way the salesperson would normally want to hear about health-based messaging.
Excellent. Thanks. So to recap, we've kind of finished Module 1 at this point. If we were doing this training, we've talked about what an average new home is, what an Energy Star home is, what an Indoor airPlus home is. We talked about the features and benefits briefly that go into an Energy Star home, and we started to talk about what our customer segmentation looks like and who's coming into our home and kind of what their key potential needs are. Now we're going to translate that knowledge and that kind of basis into creating value propositions for the sales staff to deliver to the potential home buyers. So this is the second module in Activity 3. When you talk about a value proposition, what you're talking about is just a very basic statement of kind of the tangible results that a customer is going to get from using whatever product or service it is that you're offering. It's outcome focused, and it's going to stress the business value of what you're delivering. So here's an example on the screen. I won't read this word for word, but it talks about one of their recent clients was struggling on how to reduce spending, and they saved them $800,000 in just 6 months. So very outcome focused. It didn't cut any services to their employees, nor did their employees have to pay more. So what are some typical Indoor airPlus values to kind of weave into to this value proposition? Well, it goes back a little bit to some of the charts that we were looking at earlier. Comfort, health, safety, just to focus on quality, and again, better is better, but also being in control and potentially resale value. These are all kind of values that we want to instill throughout this value proposition development. And then the brand characteristics. What are the brand characteristics that we can capitalize on that are already built into to this federal program? Well, it's a companion program to Energy Star. It's backed by the EPA. It's credible, trustworthy, etc. CR, have you utilized these types of values and brand characteristics with your sales staff?
Yeah, and we had to learn it the hard way. Unfortunately, we got out in front of this sales training program from Indoor Air Quality, and we were alienating our customers a lot initially because we weren't talking about these sorts of brand characteristics. We were talking about MERVs and ACH 50s. And about the same time as the EPA started refining our message, we were starting to understand really clearly from a number of sources how important it was that we talk to the consumer in the consumer's optics, that it needs to be something that ultimately makes a consumer feel safe, that makes a consumer be inspired to choose better. We started asking questions like, what would you look for in a trusted builder to build your home? And that authoritative, that knowledgeable, that backed by brands and agencies I trust, like the EPA and Energy Star, are so important in making a consumer differentiate from, kind of the buzz of marketing that if you're out looking for a home, you're getting inundated with every time you stop and look at a house, to something that gets beyond that skeptical shell and becomes credible and trustworthy and driven from a trusted expert perspective.
Great. Tell us a little more about how you've created change and awareness with what you've done in your approach at Meritage to sales and marketing.
Yeah, the foundation of both Energy Star and Indoor Plus is a recognition that we can voluntarily choose to build better than the code requires us to, and that there's credible benefits that we would do for our own home, for our friend's home, and as a trusted builder would do for the people that are going to be living in our homes. And change from just a psychology 101 requires three major components, because we're asking people to expand how they buy something to include health and comfort as a component of their decisions. So the first thing is you have to do something to create an awareness that there's a choice, because people haven't had the kind of health-based benefits in the market when their parents bought their home, maybe when some of their friends bought their home, maybe when they bought their last home. And so this is a new challenge to create the awareness that there's a new way to choose between good, better, best among the choices of good enough homes. And then, referencing the previous slide, it needs to be safe. It needs to be trusted. It needs to be authoritative, right? It needs to be valid. So not only do you need to say, hey, this is something that you may not have seen the last time you bought a house, or you may not have been told about by your parents when they told you how to go find a good home. It's more than just location, design, and price. You can improve the health of your homes by carefully choosing the way you build a home and the builder that's going to partner with you to build that home. And these are the validations, right? These are the authoritative experts that say that it's true and that it's important and it creates true benefits. And then ultimately, you have to recognize that a buyer is going to then now have to re-comparison shop. And to do that, you have to give them the tools. As you look at new homes, here's some questions or here's examples of what makes a healthy home, of what makes a comfortable home. And that's converting those benefits back down to the features that drive them. That's how you create the nexus between a well-built, healthy home is better air sealed. A well-built, healthy home has fresh air ventilation. A well-built, healthy home has a requirement to have low VOC materials used in it. And so this rebridges the components of how you execute an Indoor Plus home to the benefits that you're now inspiring them to choose, so they can go out and challenge other homes that they may have thought were good enough to ensure that they are as healthy and as comfortable as they've now grown to expect.
Great.
The process really starts with substance. I don't think that many builders were successful and in fact really created a problem getting their marketing ahead of it, talking about, well, we're better and we're eco-friendly, and using terms that don't actually have and aren't rooted in substance. And one of the great things about the Indoor Plus program, from my perspective, is that there is such tremendous scientific fundamentals associated with the principles and the components, and then even pulled through into the marketing benefit statement that is substantive and really starts with, you have to change your suppliers, your scope of works, and how you build a home before you can start the second step, which is inspiring and creating awareness that people can have better, that a home is not the same, and to steal the praise from Energy Star, better is better, that there is an opportunity to separate these homes that met location, design, and price into good, into better, and ultimately there's one that's best for you. And that education awareness is really driven around allowing a consumer to bridge from the building science that may be arcane and based on acronyms and MERV into something that they understand is good for them and their family. That's the perceived value. And so truly changing the way you build really requires you to go through those 3 steps, which is start with something credible, make sure that that credible thing is translated to the buyers so they now understand it well enough to choose, and that understand it well enough that they believe it's a better choice for them.
Excellent. I agree, and I think that there's also a really important piece of making that bridge that comes with collaboration within the company. And oftentimes we, especially in larger companies, we know that there are different teams, different divisions that operate within their own piece of expertise. You have the sales team, you have the marketing team, which might be slightly different than the on the ground sales staff. Of course, you have the production managers, and you have the purchasing folks who are trying to crunch the numbers and figure out exactly how to get the best bang for the buck in terms of value. But getting those teams together and talking about the needs and challenges that all of them are seeing across the company is really important. It's important for the purchasing manager and the production team to understand what the customers are saying coming in the door. It's also really important for the sales team and the marketing team to know enough about the building science and those acronyms to be able to communicate those effectively to the consumers and create that perceived value. So in doing so, we're going to hopefully engage across multiple platforms within our company, multiple tiers of the management structure, and help develop these value propositions, help create this elevator speech for the sales staff. So what we're going to do, getting back to the module here, is we're going to use answers that we had from back in Activity 1. Again, you print out your book, you refer back to your previous answers that you wrote down, and refer to those client profiles as well. And what you want to do is, work together, create with the entire class to create an ideal value proposition. And you can use this. You can do this with different types of customer segments and client types as well. I think what's really helpful is to create kind of a tool belt of value propositions. And of course, everybody will bring something slightly different to this conversation. It's good to have your team read these out loud and talk about the high points of them. You might have a very short, simple one. If you want to control over the air inside your home, if you want to protect your family and your investment, you want Indoor airPlus. Very short and sweet. You might have something that's much more highly descriptive, like the bottom one. When we build Indoor airPlus specifications, we start by meeting the stringent Energy Star requirements for new homes. Then we build an added protection against moisture damage and mold, and we use materials that are certified to be low in formaldehyde and other pollutants. We take extra care with the home's ductwork. We install a more highly rated filter on the HVAC equipment to guard against finer dust and particulates in the air, and we mount carbon monoxide alarms in every sleeping zone in the home. And really, that's just part of what it takes to qualify the home for the Indoor airPlus label. So that's a value proposition that actually details a lot of the features of the home, and maybe should have a little bit more of the benefits in the home built in as well, such as the health, safety, etc. So that's part of that the longer conversation that you might have. So to that conversation, this is the capstone activity in the sales training. It's a role play. The very end of this module, we kind of bring in all of these things we've learned about customer segmentation, features and benefits, about building that value proposition, and then work this out person to person. And for those who are introverts among your team, this can be a little bit more challenging. Hopefully your sales agents are ready and willing to engage in a conversation with the client. And if not, this is great practice for them. So one person will take the role of a sales agent, another person will take the role of a client, and the sales training booklets kind of outline some of those kind of key client roles and what you should be doing in these roles to help coach along the process as well. When you go through this role play, it's great to have two people stand up in the front, and one of them takes on a role of a cautious conservative or a concerned parent, and maybe it's not even know what that person's role is assuming, but to try and have the sales agent figure it out along the way. Have them work through the value proposition, see if they ultimately were convinced as a client to buy this home or to at least look further. And then we have a scoring matrix as well that allows the team to kind of help score each other. And this can be done if you have a large staff. You can just do this one-on-one, or again, you can do it in a large group setting and have the team actually score folks. It's not about who gets the highest score at the end, but this is a great way to kind of help the sales staff gauge themselves personally in terms of how well they did and notice areas for improvement. So this is something you can make photocopies of, print off, and revisit it every quarter, every 6 months as a sales training activity. So what's left, CR? What do they need?
Yeah, I just want to underscore, so many people push back because, as Nick pointed out, there are people that don't like to speak in public, and even oddly, you'll find salespeople don't want to stand up among their peers and demonstrate their craft and be judged by their peer set, and so you may get quite a bit of initial hesitation around role play. I will say that nothing has been more impactful in changing the culture of our sales than role play, because after you give them a lot of the here's why we're doing what we're doing and here's the things we want to say to our consumer, they think they've got it until they stand up and present it back something new and something that they're not as familiar with and they're not maybe as expert at as other components of selling home, and they recognize really quick that they may not have the tools, or at least it may not be fluid in their presentation. And if it's done in a way that's very supportive and you role play with multiple people, everybody starts to understand, hey, we're all in this together and we're all here to help bridge us from where we're at to where we want to be. And where we want to be is what I'm calling what they need is what do the customers really need from a salesperson. And the thing I've really glommed onto is the best salesperson is a trusted expert that cares. And what does that look like? How do you demonstrate that? And the first is can you set and meet consumers' expectations so they feel safe? Do they empower consumers around how to make the best decision? Do they know what it looks like? Do they know the steps forward? And so much of this role-playing within the Indoor Plus program is to help the salespeople be empowered to help a consumer make a good decision. And the safety really comes back onto is do we know what we're doing, right? Is this credible? Is this something that's well proven? And having the backing of a third-party inspection based on national standards from experts really help people feel safe, understand that there should be a lot of trust, and that the reputation of the Energy Star program, the Indoor Air Plus program, the US EPA, the third-party raters all go into that ability to feel safe, that we're going to treat some people fairly, and that we'll build and will be these partners. So, this common concept when you're buying a brand new home, it's so stressful. Do we know that you're still going to be there in the future? And so much of the bedrock of the Indoor Plus has been vetted for decades based on the science and the supply chains and the components we'll be putting in these homes, that it gives people a lot of comfort when they've got the questions to be able to go back and demonstrate that the fans and the construction techniques are well established, and a builder is going to be standing behind them throughout their warranty process, and they can feel safe based on kind of these elucidated processes. When you really get down to what we're trying to accomplish with all sales training, it's to make people feel safe and to inspire them and give them the tools to make a good choice.
Excellent. Well, that in a nutshell sums up the Indoor Air Plus Sales Training Kit. I do want to encourage anybody who's on the webinar today that if this makes sense to you, but you're still not quite sure exactly what step to take to kind of implement this with your team, please feel free to reach out to the program. We'd be happy to get on a call or do an intentional mini webinar or something for you to kind of talk through what it means to implement the sales training in your division. To find the materials themselves, please go to your My Energy Star account. Here's a screenshot of what that looks like. In your tools there, you can find the Indoor Air Plus Builder Sales Training Kit. Again, also the Energy Star Sales Training Kit is there, along with a plethora of other great resources, including the logos, which you of course want to be putting on your website, and brochures, etc. There's some other great resources and tools on the Indoor Air Plus website itself. There's some website widgets There's some consumer resources. You can, of course, find the construction requirements there and the technical guidance too. There's also a number of great brochures that you can order or print out. One of the new resources that we want to make sure you're also aware of is the Discover Indoor airPlus Homes customizable booklet. This is a really great square format sales tool. It's about 30 pages long, and it kind of covers each of the critical areas of indoor air quality within the home, mold and allergens, for example. And it'll show you those kind of critical issues on the left side, and then why Indoor airPlus matters on the right-hand side, and what those kind of key features and elements are. This is a book that you can. There's printing instructions for it as well. Very easy to take to the printer and print off some nice copies. You can even bind it and put it as a showcase in your model homes. And again, it's customizable, so you can put your logo on the front and in the middle of the book as well. Write a little bit about your company within the book. So that's also available in your My Energy Star account. And then finally, the 100% commitment to Indoor airPlus was just released. The first opening period of it was just at the end of 2016, so it's now available for 2017. You can make this commitment to label all of your homes to Indoor airPlus. You get this designation for 2017. Again, a very simple, straightforward, bold way to tell your consumers that we are doing this 100% across the board in our division. So again, go to your My Energy Star account to make that election. It's fairly straightforward. If you have any trouble with that, please feel free to reach out to the Energy Star, the Indoor airPlus teams, and they would be happy to help you for both programs. That covers the extent of what we wanted to discuss today in terms of the Indoor airPlus Sales Training Kit. There you can see the contact information for the program and the website. Again, thanks a lot to CR Hero for joining us today, and hopefully this was a good introduction for everyone to the kit.